On November 22, 1997, at 11:50 a.m., a maid at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Sydney knocked on the door of room 524. No answer. She used her key card and pushed the door open. What she found inside would shock the music world and create a mystery that remains unsolved 27 years later. Michael Hutchence, the voice of INXS, the Australian sex symbol who had sold 50 million albums worldwide and conquered MTV in the 1980s, dead at 37 years old, hanging from a door frame with a leather belt around his neck. The coroner ruled it suicide. Case closed. But Michael's family says that's wrong. They say the coroner missed critical evidence. They say what really happened in room 524 was a tragic accident, something Michael never intended. A forensic pathologist who reviewed the case 3 years later agreed with them. So what really happened that night? This is the story of Michael Hutchence's final hours, the custody battle that was destroying him, and the disturbing mystery his family is still fighting to solve. It was a Saturday morning in Sydney. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel sat in the upscale suburb of Double Bay, overlooking the harbor. Room 524 was registered to Michael Hutchence, who had checked in days earlier. He was supposed to be preparing for INXS's upcoming tour, the 20th anniversary tour that would take them across Australia and beyond. But Michael wasn't answering his phone. His bandmates had been trying to reach him all morning. They had rehearsals scheduled, important meetings about the tour. Michael was always reliable about band business, even when his personal life was chaotic. His silence was unusual. The maid had knocked earlier that morning around 10:30 a.m. No response. Hotel policy required her to wait an hour before using her key to enter. At 11:50 a.m., she returned. She knocked again, 3 firm raps on the door. Nothing. She slid her key card into the lock and pushed the door open. Michael Hutchence was hanging from the automatic closer on the door frame. A brown leather belt was around his neck. He was naked except for a pair of jeans pulled down around his ankles. His body was cold. He had been dead for hours. The maid screamed and ran to get hotel security. Within minutes, the police were called. At 12:10 p.m., officers from the New South Wales Police arrived at the Ritz-Carlton. They photographed the scene. They collected evidence. An empty vodka bottle, an empty prescription bottle of Prozac. No suicide note, no signs of struggle, no indication anyone else had been in the room. The media got wind of the story within an hour. By 2 p.m., news crews were camped outside the hotel. By 3 p.m., the story was breaking on television stations around the world. INXS singer Michael Hutchence found dead in Sydney hotel. The rock world went into shock. But before we get to what the coroner concluded and what Michael's family disputes, you need to understand who Michael Hutchence was and how he got to that hotel room on November 22, 1997. Michael Kelland John Hutchence was born on January 22, 1960, in Sydney, Australia. He was the son of business entrepreneur Kel Hutchence and makeup artist Patricia Hutchence. Michael grew up moving between Sydney and Hong Kong as his father's business career took the family across Asia. This constant movement gave Michael a worldly perspective, but also a sense of rootlessness that would follow him throughout his life. In 1977, 17-year-old Michael met Andrew Ferris at a party in Sydney. Andrew played keyboards and guitar. Michael sang. They clicked immediately and decided to form a band. Andrew's brothers, Tim, John, and middle brother John, along with Kirk Pengilly and Gary Beers. They called themselves the Ferris Brothers at first, then changed the name to INXS in 1979.
INXS started playing pubs and clubs around Sydney. They were good, really good. Michael had something special, charisma that couldn't be taught. He moved like Mick Jagger, had the looks of Jim Morrison, and possessed a voice that could be tender one moment and raw the next. When Michael Hutchence took a stage, you couldn't look away. The band released their self-titled debut album in 1980. It did okay in Australia, but went nowhere internationally. Their second album, Underneath the Colours, in 1981, had a minor hit with Stay Young, but INXS was still just an Australian band struggling to break through. Everything changed in 1984 with their fourth album, The Swing. The album went platinum in Australia and finally got them noticed internationally. But it was 1987's Kick that made INXS global superstars. Kick was a masterpiece. It combined rock, funk, new wave and pop into something that sounded fresh and irresistible. The singles were massive. Need You Tonight hit #1 in the United States. Devil Inside reached #2. New Sensation was everywhere, and Never Tear Us Apart, the sweeping, emotional ballad, became the song INXS would be remembered for. The album sold 10 million copies. INXS was suddenly one of the biggest bands in the world, and Michael Hutchence became a certified sex symbol. MTV played their videos constantly. Michael in his leather pants, shirtless, swaggering across the stage. Women wanted him. Men wanted to be him. But it was more than just looks. Michael had substance. He was intelligent, well-read, interested in art and film. He dated supermodels, Kylie Minogue, Helena Christensen, but treated them as equals, not trophies. He was complex in ways that made him fascinating. From 1987 to 1992, INXS was on top of the world. They toured constantly, playing to stadium crowds. They released successful albums. X in 1990 had hits like Suicide Blonde and Disappear. Michael's voice remained powerful, the band's chemistry was tight, everything seemed perfect. But something happened in 1992 that would change Michael forever. It was August 1992 in Copenhagen, Denmark. INXS was on tour. Michael had gone out for the evening with his then-girlfriend, Helena Christensen, the Danish supermodel. They were leaving a venue, heading to their hotel. Michael stepped out of a taxi onto the sidewalk. A man approached, a random stranger, drunk or mentally disturbed. Without warning, without provocation, the man punched Michael hard in the side of the head. Michael fell backwards and hit his head on the concrete pavement. The impact was severe. Michael suffered a severe concussion and fractured his skull. He was hospitalized immediately. The doctors told him he was lucky to be alive, a few centimeters different, and the impact could have killed him or left him paralyzed. But there was permanent damage. Michael lost his sense of taste and smell completely. For someone who loved food and wine, who took pleasure in sensory experiences, this loss was devastating. But worse than that, much worse, were the personality changes. Tim Farrison, INXS's guitarist and one of Michael's closest friends, noticed it first. He wasn't the same Michael after that head injury. Something changed in him. He was darker, more irritable. The joy seemed to have gone out of him. Andrew Farrison, the main songwriter and Michael's best friend in the band, agreed. That head injury in Copenhagen changed him. He became more impulsive, more prone to mood swings. Looking back, I think it affected his judgment, his decision-making, but we didn't understand it at the time. Medical experts now know that traumatic brain injuries can cause profound personality changes, depression, impulsivity, and poor judgment. Michael was already struggling with depression before the injury. He'd been diagnosed in the early 1990s and had even attempted suicide in 1992 after his breakup with Helena, taking an overdose of pills before calling for help. But after Copenhagen, Michael's depression deepened. He was prescribed Prozac, an antidepressant. He drank more heavily. Vodka was his drink of choice. And as the 1990s progressed and INXS's popularity began to wane with the rise of grunge and alternative rock, Michael started to feel lost. Then, in 1994, Michael met Paula Yates, and everything in his life accelerated towards tragedy. Paula Yates was a British television presenter, best known for hosting The Tube and The Big Breakfast. She was charismatic, controversial, and beautiful. She was also married to Bob Geldof, the singer from the Boom Rats and the organizer of Live Aid, one of the most respected figures in rock music.
Paula and Bob had 3 daughters together: Fifi Trixie Belle, Peaches Honey Blossom, and Little Pixie. They seemed like the perfect rock and roll family, but the marriage was troubled. Paula felt trapped. Bob was domineering and controlling, according to Paula's later accounts. In September 1994, Paula interviewed Michael Hutchence on The Big Breakfast. The chemistry between them was immediate and undeniable. Viewers could see it. Bob Geldof could see it. Within weeks, Paula and Michael began an affair. In 1995, Paula left Bob Geldof for Michael Hutchence. The British tabloids went insane. This was scandal at the highest level. The wife of Saint Bob, the man who had organized Live Aid to feed starving children, running off with the Australian rock star. Bob Geldof was humiliated and furious. He would make them pay. Michael and Paula's relationship was passionate and intense. They were deeply in love. Everyone who saw them together agreed on that. In July 1996, Paula gave birth to their daughter, Heavenly Hirani Tiger Lily Hutchence. Michael was overjoyed. He had always wanted to be a father. Tiger Lily, as she was called, became the center of his world. But Bob Geldof wasn't done. He launched a vicious custody battle for Fifi, Peaches, and Pixie, the 3 daughters he had with Paula. He painted Paula as an unfit mother, using her relationship with Michael as evidence of instability. He brought up Michael's history of drug use, mostly historical cocaine use, nothing current. He hired the best lawyers money could buy. And he won. In 1996, Bob Geldof was granted primary custody of the 3 girls. Paula could see them, but they would live primarily with Bob. More devastating, Bob used his custody arrangement to block Paula from taking the girls to Australia to visit Michael. This was the situation in 1997. Michael was in Australia preparing for INXS's tour. Paula was in London fighting to see her daughters. Tiger Lily, Michael's daughter, was with Paula in London. Bob Geldof was using every legal maneuver to keep Paula and the girls away from Michael. Michael felt powerless. In interviews that year, he called Bob Geldof evil. He said, "I've never been happier in my personal life. Paula and Tiger Lily are my whole world. But Bob Geldof is trying to destroy us. He's using the kids as weapons. It's pure revenge." Friends said Michael was becoming obsessed with the custody situation. He would call Paula multiple times a day. He would rage about Bob Geldof to anyone who would listen. The helplessness was eating him alive. And then came November 21st, 1997, the last night of Michael Hutchence's life. Michael had arrived back at the Ritz-Carlton in the early evening. He had been out that day dealing with tour business and meeting with INXS bandmates. He got back to room 524 around 7 p.m. He was alone. At 9:54 p.m., Michael called Paula Yates in London. It was early morning in London, about 11 a.m. This phone call would be the beginning of Michael's final spiral. The call lasted about 20 minutes, and according to Paula's later accounts, it was heated. They weren't arguing with each other. They were both upset about the same thing: Bob Geldof. Paula told Michael that Bob was threatening new legal action. He was going to try to get full custody, cutting Paula out completely. He was planning to use Michael's past drug use and depression history against them in court. Bob was also refusing to let Paula bring Tiger Lily to Australia for the tour. Paula was crying. She was desperate. She told Michael, "If you loved me, you'd come to London right now." Michael was furious, not at Paula, at the situation, at Bob, at his own powerlessness. He said, "If Bob wasn't blocking us, you'd be here right now. We'd be together. This is his revenge." Paula later said they were both crying by the end of the call, both screaming, both feeling trapped. Michael hung up at 10:14 p.m., according to phone records. At 11:47 p.m., Michael called Michelle Bennett. Michelle was Michael's ex-girlfriend from the 1980s, but they had remained close friends. She knew him better than almost anyone. Michael often called Michelle when he was upset. She was one of the few people he truly trusted. The call lasted 18 minutes. Michelle later told investigators he was upset about the Paula situation, about not being able to see Tiger Lily, about Bob Geldof. But he wasn't suicidal. He was angry, yes, frustrated, but we talked about Christmas plans. He wanted to have Tiger Lily for Christmas. He was talking about the tour. He was making plans for the future. Michelle said Michael sounded sad, but not hopeless, upset, but not despairing. When they hung up at 12:05 a.m. on November 22nd, she didn't think anything was seriously wrong, just Michael venting about the custody nightmare he was living through. Around 12:30 a.m. on November 22nd, Michael called Kim Wilson. Kim was another friend, someone Michael had known for years. He asked her to come over to the hotel, to keep him company. Kim said she couldn't. She had to work early the next morning. She felt bad about declining, but it seemed like a routine request. Michael said he understood. They hung up.
That was the last phone call Michael made, the last person he spoke to. At some point after 1 a.m., Michael left the hotel. A taxi driver later came forward to say he picked up Michael around 1:30 a.m. from a location about 2 kilometers from the Ritz-Carlton. The taxi driver said Michael seemed intoxicated, but not falling down drunk. He was quiet during the ride. The driver dropped him back at the Ritz-Carlton around 5 a.m. Where Michael went during those hours has never been definitively established. He wasn't seen at any bars or clubs. Some have speculated he went for a walk to clear his head. Others suggest he might have scored drugs, though no hard drugs were found in his system. Michael returned to room 524 at approximately 5 a.m. He was alone. He went inside and closed the door. 7 hours later, the maid would find his body. So what did the coroner conclude? On February 6, 1998, New South Wales State Coroner Derek Hand delivered his verdicts on the death of Michael Hutchence. The official finding? Suicide. Specifically, the coroner ruled that Michael had taken his own life while under the influence of alcohol and drugs and while the balance of his mind was disturbed. The evidence the coroner cited was straightforward. Michael was found hanging from a door frame with a belt around his neck. There was an empty bottle of Prozac in the room and an empty vodka bottle. Michael had a documented history of depression and had attempted suicide once before in 1992. He had been in a highly distressed state over the custody battle. The coroner concluded these factors pointed clearly to suicide. The coroner's official statement read, "The deceased has taken his own life whilst the balance of his mind was disturbed and while he was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. I am satisfied that the cause of death was hanging." Case closed. Or so it seemed. But Michael's family immediately disputed the verdict. His mother, Patricia Glassup, and his sister, Tina Hutchence, both insisted the coroner had gotten it wrong. They said Michael would never have killed himself intentionally. They said the evidence pointed to something else entirely. Their alternative theory, autoerotic asphyxiation, an accidental death during a sexual practice that Michael had been researching. The evidence they pointed to was disturbing and specific. Michael's body position suggested autoerotic activity, not suicide. He was naked except for jeans pulled down around his ankles, a detail that makes little sense for someone intending to kill themselves, but is consistent with autoerotic practices. There was no suicide note, which was unusual given that Michael was articulate and had kept journals throughout his life. If he intended to die, surely he would have written something to Tiger Lily, to Paula, to his family. Most significantly, friends revealed that Michael had been asking questions about autoerotic asphyxiation in the weeks before his death. He had mentioned reading about it. Some interpreted this as morbid curiosity. Others saw it as evidence he had been experimenting with the practice. Paula Yates was adamant from the beginning. Michael didn't commit suicide. He would never leave Tiger Lily. Never. It was an accident. A terrible, stupid accident. But nobody wants to believe that because suicide is easier to understand and doesn't make people uncomfortable. Kim Wilson, the friend Michael had called that final night, agreed. "I spoke to him just hours before. He wanted company. He was lonely, not suicidal. There's a huge difference. Michael loved Tiger Lily more than anything. He was fighting for her. He would never have abandoned her." In 2000, 3 years after Michael's death, the family hired Dr. Derek Pounder, a respected forensic pathologist, to review the case.
Dr. Pounder examined all the evidence, the autopsy reports, the photographs, the witness statements. His conclusion was startling. The circumstances point to accident, not suicide. The position of the body, the lack of a suicide note, and the other factors present are entirely consistent with autoerotic asphyxiation gone wrong. The coroner's verdict was premature. But here's the problem. Dr. Pounder's opinion didn't change the official verdict. The coroner's findings stood. Legally, officially, Michael Hutchence died by suicide. No amount of expert analysis could overturn that ruling without a formal inquest reopening, which never happened.
So we're left with a mystery that will never be definitively solved. Was it suicide? Was it an accident? The truth died with Michael in room 524. What we do know is this. Michael Hutchence was in profound emotional pain in November 1997. The custody battle was destroying him. He felt powerless to help Paula and protect his daughter. The head injury from 1992 had changed his personality and affected his judgment. He was mixing alcohol and Prozac, a dangerous combination. He was isolated in that hotel room, thousands of miles from the woman he loved and the daughter he adored. Whether he intended to die or not, Michael Hutchence died alone, in pain, and desperate. The aftermath of Michael's death was devastating and would claim another victim 3 years later. Paula Yates never recovered. She appeared on television days after Michael's death, her face gaunt and haunted. She insisted it was an accident, not suicide. She told their daughter, Tiger Lily, "Daddy had an accident. He didn't mean to leave us." Paula's life spiraled rapidly. She lost her television career. She became addicted to heroin, a drug she had never used before Michael's death, but turned to in her grief. Bob Geldof used her deteriorating condition to solidify his custody of Fifi, Peaches, and Pixie. Paula was barely allowed to see her own daughters. On September 17, 2000, just 3 years after Michael's death, Paula Yates was found dead in her London home, heroin overdose. She was 41 years old. Tiger Lily Hutchence was 4 years old. She had lost her father at 16 months. Now she had lost her mother. She was orphaned. Bob Geldof, to his credit, stepped in. He adopted Tiger Lily and raised her alongside her half-sisters. Tiger Lily's last name was legally changed to Geldof. She grew up in Bob's household, largely shielded from the media. Today, Tiger Lily Hutchence Geldof is 27 years old. She lives quietly, avoiding the spotlight that consumed her parents. She has spoken rarely about Michael and Paula. In a 2019 interview, she said, "I don't remember my dad. I was only 16 months old when he died. I've built my idea of him from videos, photos, stories. Sometimes I wonder who I would be if he was still here. Sometimes I listen to Never Tear Us Apart and cry, even though I don't know why." Tiger Lily inherited Michael's estate, though most of the money was gone by the time she came of age, consumed by legal fees and debts. Her relationship with Bob Geldof is complicated. He raised her, but he's also the man her father called evil, the man Paula blamed for destroying their family. It's a tragedy that extends across 3 lives: Michael, who died at 37, Paula, who followed him 3 years later, and Tiger Lily, who lost both parents before she was old enough to remember them. INXS tried to continue after Michael's death. In 2001, they began performing with replacement singers. They held a reality show competition called Rockstar INXS in 2005 to find a new frontman. J.D. Fortune won and toured with the band for several years. But it never felt right. Fans were divided. Some supported the band's decision to continue. Others saw it as disrespectful to Michael's memory. The replacement singers were talented, but they weren't Michael Hutchence. They couldn't be. In 2012, INXS officially retired. The remaining members gave their final tour and said goodbye. Tim Ferriss said, "We can never replace Michael. We shouldn't have tried. He was INXS. Without him, we're just musicians playing songs." The band's legacy remains enormous. 50 million albums sold worldwide, multiple #1 hits.
Induction into the ARIA Hall of Fame. Never Tear Us Apart continues to be used in films and television shows. New generations discover INXS through streaming services and video platforms. And Michael Hutchence is remembered as one of the greatest frontmen in rock history. His charisma was undeniable, his voice was powerful and nuanced, his stage presence was magnetic. At his peak, from 1987 to 1992, Michael Hutchence was untouchable. But his life was cut short at 37, and the mystery of how he died, suicide or accident, will never be fully resolved. So what really happened in room 524 on November 22, 1997? The evidence for suicide is strong. Michael had depression, a previous suicide attempt, was on antidepressants, had been drinking, was in emotional distress over the custody battle, and was found hanging with a belt.
The evidence for accidental death is also compelling. The body position consistent with autoerotic asphyxiation, the lack of a suicide note from someone who loved to write, Michael's research into autoerotic practices weeks before, his plans for the future mentioned in his last phone calls, and the expert opinion of Dr. Derek Pounder. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. Perhaps Michael was engaging in a risky practice while intoxicated and depressed, and it went wrong. Perhaps his judgment was impaired by the head injury, the alcohol, the Prozac, the emotional turmoil. Perhaps he was being reckless with his life without necessarily wanting to end it. We'll never know for certain. What we do know is that Michael Hutchence died in pain, emotional pain that had been building for years, accelerated by the custody battle that was tearing his family apart. We know that Bob Geldof's custody warfare played a significant role in Michael's state of mind that night. The phone call with Paula at 9:54 p.m., both of them crying, both feeling trapped, was the final trigger. We know that Paula Yates never recovered from losing Michael and followed him to the grave 3 years later. We know that Tiger Lily Hutchence grew up without her parents, raised by the man her father considered his enemy. And we know that INXS was never the same. The band that had conquered the world in the 1980s effectively died with Michael in room 524. Today, if you watch old INXS videos from their peak years, you'll see Michael Hutchence at his best, shirtless in leather pants, microphone in hand, commanding the stage with effortless cool, singing Need You Tonight or Never Tear Us Apart with that voice that could shift from tender to raw in seconds, smiling that knowing smile that made him a sex symbol to millions. It's hard to reconcile that vital, charismatic performer with the man who died alone in a hotel room at 37. But that's the tragedy of Michael Hutchence. He had everything and lost it all. Fame couldn't save him. Talent couldn't save him. Love couldn't save him. Whether it was suicide or accident, the result is the same. A life cut tragically short, a daughter left without a father, and a mystery that will haunt rock music history forever. The door to room 524 at the Ritz-Carlton is still there. The hotel is still operating. Guests stay in that room, probably unaware of what happened there on November 22, 1997. Life goes on. But for those who knew Michael Hutchence, for those who loved his music, for those who understand that even rock stars can feel powerless and alone, the mystery remains, and the question will always linger: what really happened that night? If this story moved you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who remembers INXS from MTV. Have you ever felt powerless to help someone you love? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments that define us and the mysteries that remain unsolved.